My Little Pony. The phenomena nobody expected and nobody necessarily wanted, but we got it, and I have to say it's pretty good, all things considered. I'm going to get this out of the way right now. I myself am a Brony. B-R-O-N-Y, Brony. And I have no shame, not going to hide it. I like this show. I think it's good. One of the best shows I've seen in a while now, and honestly, it's really good. And but I'm not here to preach. I'm not here to, tell you to go watch this show. Go make that decision for yourself, assuming you already don't watch it, because I'm not entirely sure why a person who doesn't watch the show already would watch this video. But regardless, now primarily you'll find this fandom on the internet, the home of all fandoms really, but on the internet it's truly massive, outside of course all the conventions, the BronyCons, and all the other conventions that happened as a result, which is kind of amazing that a single series, My Little Pony no less, ended up with so many conventions based around it. And then there's the stuff on the internet like the forums, the message boards, the wikis, the fan fiction. Oh, the fan fiction. Don't get me started on that. I'm not going to go into it. There's a part of that I don't want to talk about. I'm sure you all can guess what that is. And then of course there's YouTube, all the videos, all the other reviews that are here on YouTube, and of course, don't even get me started on the PMVs. There are so many PMVs, and the fact that that term even exists. This fandom is kind of ridiculous, and that's one of the reasons it's so amazing that it even exists, that it's this show that's clearly made and marketed for little girls, but for whatever reason it appealed so much to grown men such as myself. I'm 21 now, and honestly, you know what, I'm a fan of the show. I've only been a fan of this show for like maybe 6 months, probably less, and I can honestly say I love it, and that's why I'm here talking about it now. And I'm talking about it because I want to talk about things that other people may not have necessarily talked about, and I want to get my opinion out there about it. But I'm kind of rambling at this point, so let's kind of focus. I'm here to review, and you're here to watch me review, the first 2 episodes, Friendship is Magic, Part 1 and 2 of My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. So, let's go! Now, this show starts out in a rather interesting way. Instead of, starting out with the characters doing something and allowing them to give us their traits so we can associate a certain personality trait with them, instead, the show starts out with the interesting facet of starting out with a storybook and narration and showing us the backstory of 2 integral characters in the backstory of the world of the show and in the life of certain characters, particularly the mentor of the main character, Twilight Sparkle, who, as it turns out, is reading this storybook. And this is a good way to show off characterization in that it shows that she's a bookworm. She's so focused on this that she insists on going to the library, where she currently resides, the Royal Library, nonetheless, and cross-reference, in this case, the legend of Marin the Moon. We'll get to that in a bit. Along the way, we see Twilight talk to several characters who we could presume to be her friends, but I'd call them more acquaintances or casual friends, not really friends in the more, you're very close to them and you hang out with them and you want to hang out with them kind of way. Now, once we get to the library, we're introduced to my absolute favorite character for this series, Spike the Dragon. Why is he my favorite character again? Seriously, Looking back on it, again, I only recently started, at least recently in the sense of how long this show has been on the air, started watching it, and I can say that this moment doesn't paint either of them in a very good light. Spike, who takes a door to the face and, acts rather casually about it, like, you know what, no, this is a big deal, even though my primary caretaker and my boss essentially just smacked me in the face with a door. And that is Spike's function in this world. He is the assistant of Twilight Spark, who at the moment is herself the personal student of Princess Celestia of Equestria. Twilight herself is more concerned with studying. The only people she seems to have any kind of real relationship with being, at the moment, Spike and Celestia herself, although we do not yet meet Celestia. Now, we see Spike help out in this scenario, and we see him showcase his duties, as it were, being Twilight's assistant. Helping her find a certain book, or helping her put the books back, as it were. Essentially doing all this, and finally, after Twilight finds said book and analyzes it and comes to the conclusion that an ancient, evil princess is coming back in less than 24 hours to cause eternal night, Spike takes a letter on her behalf. While he was writing the letter, we get a little bit more characterization of Spike, and I have to say this early characterization of him in the first episode is not really very flattering, and that Spike here, I feel, is not being portrayed well. We see him writing this letter to Princess Celestia for Twilight, and in it, he's specifically fumbling on certain large words, and I'm terrible at spelling myself, but we see in later episodes, in the best parts of Spike, and the reason that he is my favorite character is that while he has his moments where he doesn't do well, where he shines is being Twilight's assistant and being kind of hyper-competent in that. Here, he comes off as slightly more juvenile, not just in his inability to spell these words, but in the performance by Kathy Westlock, who is the voice actress who plays Spike, and she does a good job. But here, it comes off as slightly more juvenile than it would in later portrayals down the line. And I have to say, it doesn't complement Spike very well, especially, and being that he is my favorite character, I have to say that it's clear that he didn't become my favorite character here in the first episode. We then see Spike send the letter to Princess Celestia via fire breath. And this is one of my personal favorite moments in the first episode, showcasing this ability that he has. We're wondering at the moment, is this normal? Is this how they use fire-breathing dragons in this part of Equestria? Do they generally just send mail this way? And while we will later find that that is not the case, this is a special situation, being that Spike is the personal assistant to the personal student of the princess of the nation of Equestria. And that showcases that this is a very special, a very special circumstance. We then get a moment where Twilight says that her mentor, Princess Celestia, has never once doubted her in all her time as her student. Not 2 minutes later, the letter arrives, which Celestia reads, or must read, really freaking fast, because she sent that reply lickety-split, and so Spike receives it. Also, this shows that this is a spell because, unlike dragons, the ponies don't naturally have the ability to breathe fire, so clearly it is a spell, and it showcases something that I think a lot of people overlook in the show, is that this is a spell, and it's a spell that Spike learned, meaning that dragons must have an inherent kind of magic, otherwise he wouldn't be able to send this letter to the princess. Now, to undermine that moment from dear Twilight earlier, where she said her mentor never doubted her, Celestia claims that she really needs to get out of the library and stop studying so much. She needs to make some friends, get out more, have, a social life, really. I can kind of relate to that. We transition to Spike and Twilight riding on a flying chariot being pulled by Pegasus. And again, this shows just what kind of situation they're used to. Because, up until this point, we're shown that Twilight is the personal student of Princess Celestia. She lives essentially in the library of the palace, and she gets a personal assistant who is a freaking dragon. And now she's riding in a Pegasus-drawn carriage. And I like to point out, the Pegasus are sapient, just like the rest of the ponies and the dragons, apparently, and most creatures in this world, and yet they are still delegated to carry, people in chariots, at least in the royal chariots, and this is it kind of brings up a serious question. Now, of course, this is happening post-intro, and I'll just say this really quick. I am not the big fan of the intro to the show. I'm not a big fan of the song. It's probably my least favorite song in the entire series, of which there are quite a few. But all things considered, it does showcase a few things. We see Spike and Twilight arrive in a hot air balloon, which shows that outside of, Pegasus-drawn carriages, which are more than likely something that only the royals and nobles of the nation can afford or are entitled to, the hot air balloon is probably the most efficient kind of travel. Of course, we also see a train in the background of the intro at the same moment. And we later see throughout the series many uses of a train. Ironically, the hot air balloon thing is probably, I think, only shown maybe once in one episode here in the first season. Now, once they land in Ponyville, essentially Celestia has assigned them to prepare for the event, shall we say, the plot event in this first half of the two-parter. They've been assigned the task by Princess Celestia to make sure the preparations for the Summer Sun Festival are on track and are, of course, going smoothly. Now, before they go about actually accomplishing this very important task handed down to them by the monarch of this country, whom trusts this pony, this unicorn, her personal student, to get the task done. Now, before they go about doing this, they meet a pony, and they say hello to this pony, in a sort of attempt of Spike to try and get Twilight to make friends, which is another thing that Celestia has ordered Twilight to do, and which Twilight essentially refuses to do. She refuses to take a direct order from her mentor, who is also the princess ruling this nation. I think you might be missing something there, Twilight. And Twilight even makes this statement.
But the fate of Equestria does not rest on me making friends.
Yeah, Twilight, sure. No, it doesn't depend on that at all. Not at all. Moving on. So they say hello to this pony. Spike tries to get Twilight to make friends, as she was ordered. And Twilight goes along with it to humor him, and this is what happens. I'm going to say this right now. That was Pinkie Pie. She's completely insane. And she's also my favorite pony. There is something seriously wrong with me. Moving on. Again. Anyway, after that very amusing scene, I found it amusing anyway, the two of them head over to Sweet Apple Acres, which is a local apple farm here in Ponyville, where they, of course, go about asking about the food. Which I'd like to point out that while I don't have anything against apple-based products, I have to say, if the food is primarily apple-based, which is more or less what this scene indicates, I don't know. I mean, I get it. They're ponies, but I'm gonna be honest. I mean, outside of the fact that it's mostly apples, and I don't know how anybody could eat that much apple-based products, but the fact is, I don't think that, despite what some people might think, I don't think this is as healthy, and the fact that it's mostly, like, mostly baked goods kind of proves my point. But here we meet the first of our other main characters, outside of Twilight and Spike, respectively. This is Applejack. She's actually my least favorite pony, along with Fluttershy. Yeah. Come on, boo me. Boo me all you want, but I have my reasons. Now, Applejack, I like her character. Don't get me wrong. She's my least favorite of the main six, but I do, so maybe that earlier statement was a little bit extreme. But she is my least favorite of the main six, and here's why. She's stubborn, and that's fine. I can understand that. But there's being stubborn, and then there's being kind of arrogant to the point where half the time I want to smack her, and I feel bad about that because even though she's a fictional character, but because she doesn't like to admit when she's wrong, like ever, which is kind of ironic considering she's the element of honesty. But then again, as this show will soon prove, being the element of something does not dictate that that's your only character trait. For instance, outside of being honest, Applejack is also Southern, or at least meant to be a Southern stereotype. That being said, this is another case where the early voice acting is a little bit off. Not bad, just not quite as perfected as with the rest of the cast. Twilight also had this, but it's far less noticeable, whereas with Spike and Applejack here, it's a little bit more noticeable, but it's not terrible, and I would hardly, I'm gonna give the credit to the fact that this person is somehow, I mean, I've never heard her talk in her normal voice, so I don't know what she actually sounds like. But all things considered, Ashley Ball here does a really good job, and she does a convincing Southern stereotype voice, which works in this world full of brightly colored, magical, talking, tiny horses. We are then introduced to the Apple family. More or less all of them, or at least most of them. And like Applejack, every last one of them is either an apple pun or has the word apple in it. Case in point.
This here's apple fritter, apple bumpkin, red gallon, red delicious, golden delicious, caramel apple, apple strudel, apple tart, baked apples, apple brioche, apple cinnamon crisp, big Macintosh, apple bloom, and Granny Smith.
And of course, Applejack is very enthusiastic to make friends with Twilight.
Well, howdy do, Miss Twilight. A pleasure making your acquaintance. I'm Applejack. We here at Sweet Apple Acres sure do like making new friends.
Twilight, who at this point is definitely not interested in making friends and cringes at the very idea of it. Although whether or not it's just the idea of being friends or being friends with Applejack specifically is hard to tell. Because even if I have my problems with her, I'd totally be her friend. I probably wouldn't come over if there was a family reunion going on, but that's an entirely different discussion. Twilight, of course, tries to get out of it, but she succumbs to the one thing that all true men and really nice women are weak to.
Aren't you gonna stay
Cute
for
face of a really young child, or in this case, a foal, which is an even tinier version of a little pony. In this case, more specifically, Applejack's younger sister, Apple Bloom. Seriously, look at her. She's so cute. If you do not find this cute, and if you do not give in to any of her demands, then you, sir, or madam, are a monster. You hear me? A monster. So in the end, Twilight and Spike stay for brunch. We then move on to find that Twilight has a distended stomach that makes her look very pregnant. Don't worry though, instead she just ate too much pie. I'm gonna be honest, I kinda wish I had some pie right now myself. But anyway, they move on to the next stage, which in this case happens to be the clearing of the sky of clouds, which a certain Pegasus named Rainbow Dash has been assigned to do, but of course has not done yet. Now, in this case, we are then promptly introduced to Rainbow Jack. Rainbow Jack, what the hell did I just say? Oh god, the shippers, they've influenced my mind. Don't listen. Don't listen! We are promptly introduced to Rainbow Dash. How, you might ask? Well... roll the clip. Yeah. This is something that she's actually pretty well known for, as a childhood nickname of hers was actually Rainbow Crash. Although she was given that nickname by a bunch of bullies, but that is neither here nor there. It's about whether or not the name sticks, and it kinda does, so... regardless, she crashes into Twilight, and of course, because of her, Twilight is covered in mud. So what does she do? Well, she pulls in a cloud and proceeds to have it rain upon Twilight. Of course, this doesn't really help the situation. So, being a Pegasus, who, of course, can manipulate the weather, she creates a tornado, though she calls it this.
How about this? My very own patented Rain Blow Dry.
Rainbow Dash. Never say that again. I know it's been 7 seasons we've had you, and you've never said that again, but just in case, never say that again. To the writers of MLP, never say that again. Never let her say that again. It sounds wrong. Maybe my mind's in the gutter, but it sounds wrong. Once again, moving on. The results of the thing I shall never say out loud turn out to be a hairstyle that I feel personally would probably fit very well in the 80s. Of course, both Spike and Rainbow Dash laugh at this. This is a good example of what I think this first episode does really well, is introducing the main characters and showing off their primary personality traits, or in some cases, stereotypes. Rainbow Dash is kind of very rude and brash and loud. She's number 4 on my list of my favorite of the main 6. We then get this, in my opinion, brilliant use of subterfuge or reverse psychology, or whatever it is, where Twilight manipulates Rainbow into doing her job because, of course, all she wanted to do was nap. She's also very, very, very lazy. She challenges her to do it. Of course, Rainbow says she can do it in 10 seconds flat. As a matter of fact, while she does it damn fast, she actually does it in 8 seconds flat. I timed it. I am a nerd who watches My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Regardless, the job is done, And Twilight is actually kind of impressed. Well, she's more flabbergasted than impressed, but she is impressed. And once again, somebody claims to be Twilight's friend without her consent. Granted, they don't actually use the word friend here, but she says she wants to hang out with her again, and so that more or less implies it, and then of course she flies off. And my third favorite in the main six. Oh, Rarity, why do you torture me so? If I had to describe one of the things this show is really good at, and I think I've actually mentioned it already here, once again, it's characterization. In the primary cast, each have something going for them in one way or another, though it may not be obvious in the first of the first two episodes. Lauren Faust, the initial showrunner and creator of this particular series, wrote Rarity is an interesting example. She is into fashion. She's a fashionista, but she's actually a fashion designer. She designs clothes, which, as an occupation, while is very interesting, is also kind of odd when you consider the fact that about 90% of the time in the series, everybody is naked, which brings up some very interesting economic and social and cultural questions when it comes to this world. And you might expect her to be a bit of a snob, and while she can be at times, though surprisingly not in this episode, Rarity, of course, has been hired to decorate the event place for the Summer Sun celebration. Although now that I think about it, I know that the building has a name. I think it might be the town hall, but I can't remember. I'm pretty sure this is one of my off days. I'm usually pretty good with this stuff, but I can't remember if it's town hall or not. She's decorating because she's apparently also an interior decorator, which seems like a far less lucrative business under the circumstances, and makes a nice comment, which I think is a good example of why her character isn't your stereotypical girly girl who's only into fashion and guys, although those are both part of her personality. She makes just the way she says this line, played by Tabitha St. Germain.
Afternoon. Just a moment, please. I'm in the zone, as 'twere.
While it's not much, in my opinion, it is a fantastic way to show that she's not exactly your typical character of this type. Once she's gotten the decorating out of the way, she turns to Twilight, who's been trying to get her attention this whole time. Although Spike is of no help because he seems to have fallen in love with her at first sight. Now, the story that goes around is that Lauren Faust specifically had Spike do this to exemplify why Rarity was apparently a fine example of beauty in this equine society. Of course, then the writers who, in future episodes, when writing those two in any given situation, capitalized on said attraction, making it a full-on crush, which, I'm gonna be honest, while I appreciate the friendship that develops between these two because of it, I've never been a supporter of the relationship in question, at least romantically. Although I'm gonna be honest and say it's specifically because I ship Spike with somebody else. I'm not gonna say who, because I don't want to get into that right now. But I will say that that is the primary reason. Otherwise, I do like these two as friends. Otherwise, let's move on. Rarity somehow drags Twilight, and Spike kind of just follows because, you know, he's distracted by her great beauty. Nothing against Rarity. She's, good looking, I guess. She's a cartoon character, though, and she's a tiny horse, so what am I supposed to say to that? I don't know. So she somehow manages to drag Twilight all the way to her home / business, Carousel Boutique. So Twilight is essentially being used as a dress-up doll in this scene, and I'm going to say that while some of the stuff that Rarity comes up with, a lot of it really is actually quite good, all things considered, considering, you know, everything that happens and her many, many clothing designs, but I will say that I personally do not find myself impressed by anything I see in this scene, though it is only the first episode. Twilight, of course, attempts to introduce herself only after Rarity allows her to, and is for some reason tightening what appears to be the pony equivalent of a corset, which is both interesting and just a little bit disturbing, if only because I have done research on corsets. Shut up. It's not weird. Of course, once Rarity hears that Twilight and Spike are from Canterlot, she kind of gets all, well, this.
Canterlot? Oh, I am so envious. The glamour, the sophistication. I've always dreamed of living there. I can't wait to hear all about it.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing about Rarity's character. She apparently was born and raised in Ponyville, and she seems to have a certain detachment from her family. Not majorly, but in a way that suggests that she very much wants to move away from her roots. Of course, once Rarity has finished having her little fit, she allows herself a moment to scoff at the fact that she decided emeralds would go well in this corset satchel that she has essentially strapped against the will of onto Twilight. Yeah. And then she runs off. Of course, Spike and Twilight escape. Well, Twilight escapes and allows Spike to ride on her back, as he often does, because really, she probably couldn't function without him. And you might think I'm kidding, but as we'll learn in later episodes, she pretty much can't get anything done without Spike. Of course, he kind of needs her in a similar fashion too, so it all evens out in the end. Finally, we reach the final member of the main six. I do think she has more character progression than most people who watch the show. But at the same time, when it comes to Fluttershy, there is a reason her and Applejack tend to flip-flop for my least favorite character. Now, while Applejack can come off as stubborn and very cocky because of it, being Southern doesn't really help that image much, but Fluttershy is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, and at the same time, I find that just as irritating. Not that I dislike her character or I fault anybody, because I know there are people who are like this. My problem with Fluttershy is that, alright, so I'm just gonna come out and say it. Fluttershy is boring. Or not even boring, just forgettable. And let me give you an example of just how forgettable she is. And this is nothing against her. This is just how poorly she registers in my brain. When I was looking over the first 2 episodes so that I could review them properly, as I'm trying to do at the moment, I was handing out points to certain characters to help score the episode. And when I was writing down the names of those characters, the prominent ones that is, in the episode, I forgot to write Fluttershy's name until I actually saw her on screen, because that's how forgettable she is to me. It's sad, but she's good. She's entertaining when she can be, but in the end, the way her character has been designed, more character personality standpoint than from an actual visual standpoint, because she is adorable visually speaking, but she's forgettable, and that makes it very difficult for her to stick with me, and as such, she's on the bottom. Although, if I had to choose offhand which one I like more, I'm gonna be honest, I'd probably stick Applejack dead last, with Fluttershy just barely squeaking above. So, in conversating with Spike, Fluttershy essentially follows them, Spike and Twilight, back to their new home. The home they'll be staying in Ponyville. Temporarily. Which is technically correct, but not gonna spoil it. Even though, if you are watching this, you totally should be aware of what I'm talking about. Regardless. And, of course, Twilight, being tired of all this friend-making, decides that she's going to use Spike as an excuse, claiming that because he's a baby dragon, he needs his sleep. Now, of course, it works and Fluttershy is thrown off. Then we go into the library where Spike and Twilight will be staying. It's dark. The lights are off. And they're talking, and Twilight claims that she wants to just study, and that everybody in this town is crazy. Which, one of those things is very, very true. The lights then turn on. One, we get the fantastic scene of their being surrounded by pretty much everybody who lives in Ponyville, throwing them a welcoming party of sorts. Which, considering is being held literally the night, or not even the night, like couple hours before the Summer Sun Festival, speaks highly to the way these ponies live. We are formally introduced to the pink pony, Pinkie Pie. Full name, Pinkamena Diane Pie. She is my favorite of the main six. She's my favorite pony overall, and when it comes to characters, she only tails very closely behind Spike himself. And Pinkie is fantastic for a number of reasons. She's zany, she's enthusiastic, she loves to plan a party, and she's completely insane. And of course, Twilight attempts to completely ignore Pinkie. Not cool, Twilight. Not cool, and goes over to the refreshment table. In which case, despite having unicorn magic, for some reason uses her mouth to pour a bottle of something into a glass to drink. Although, actually, now that I think about it, I think there was something already in the glass, which brings up the question of why she would be pouring something else into it. But then again, she doesn't even look at the bottle before doing so whatever. Of course, once she actually starts drinking it, she continuously ignores Pinkie Pie all the meanwhile. She drinks it, and, well, this happens.
Are you alright, Sugar Cube?
Yeah, turns out that thing she was pouring into that cup was, in fact, hot sauce. Which, you know, why you would stick the bottle of hot sauce on the table of refreshments, I don't know. Granted, there is a plate of cupcakes there, which is why Pinkie can do this. I wouldn't personally pour said hot sauce over the cupcake, but I might be willing to try it once. I can't imagine it'd be very good, but I've been surprised before, so... And if anybody out there has actually tried this, which I really wouldn't be surprised, and I've heard things, and I've seen things. Anyway, Twilight runs off, both because of her more or less being done with all this friendship stuff, and because, you know, hot sauce, really, actually she just drank the hot sauce. Pinkie, who put the hot sauce on the cupcake. Again, I'm okay with it because it's Pinkie and because kind of makes me love her more, but at the same time it's like, it's hot sauce on a cupcake. That cannot be good for the digestive system. And so in the intervening, I'm assuming hours, Twilight more or less sulks in her new room and basically just listens and moans and complains. Spike, of course, comes in wearing a lampshade, proving that whatever is going on in this party is far more interesting than whatever the hell Twilight is currently saying. She, of course, decides to reflect as best she can and hopes that she's wrong about Nightmare Moon, because, you know, that is what this whole thing was about and why she so wants to study. I mean, she'd be studying regardless, but in this case, she has a slightly more legitimate reason for wanting to, but she hopes she's wrong. And then Spike, probably less than 2 minutes after coming in, says that it's time for the celebration to begin. That was too fast. It was just too fast. Twilight is worried, Spike is excited, Pinky is really excited, and everybody's kind of, sort of happy about this. Nobody's expecting anything bad to happen. The image of Nightmare Moon, or rather the image of a mare in the moon, disappears from the moon, which, again, you know, that was a thing, although I will say that the animation for that looks fantastic. It just looks really good, and it's like one of those things that makes me want to like get into it, because animation is just kind of amazing. So I thank you, DHX. You guys do a really good job. Anyway, back to my rant, essentially. Of course, once they finally open the curtain, there's no Celestia. Now, many have attributed this to the obvious, imminent, pretty much final, there's no chance it wasn't going to happen, arrival of Nightmare Moon. In my opinion, I'm not convinced of this, because the way it plays out, and this is one of those things about Celestia that I think she just likes to do with her teaching style, at least from what we've seen of it in the show. We don't know what it was like before Twilight moved to Ponyville. Very hands-off. She knew that Nightmare Moon was coming, you know, and so I'm 100% convinced that she deliberately didn't show up. She deliberately disappeared to allow Twilight and her newfound friends to handle the situation. Now, Nightmare Moon shows up, and she is kind of amazing. Like, even as far as cartoon villains go, and cartoon villains for little children, this is actually pretty impressive. She's sinister, she kind of, and knowing her backstory, she kind of reminds me of Darth Vader. And then we see her later, just kind of strike 3 guards down, which I like that there were guards there. I guess they were Celestia's guards, but she kind of left. And she strikes them down with lightning. I don't know if they're dead. That's going to be kind of awkward later if they are dead and she turns back into Luna. You know, she essentially declares her ambitions that she's going to rule over Equestria again. You know, even though nobody's remembering her, apparently, except Twilight, who did her research, and saw the signs, and is now going to take away the moon. Now, many fans of this show complain that not allowing the moon to be there would cause a lot of problems, most prominently, the world freezing over. To this I say, this is a show about magical, talking, tiny, pastel-colored horses whose rulers move the sun and moon with their magic. There are mythical creatures, dragons who transport mail with their fire, and a host of other things that I could talk about forever. But the thing that people focus on in this show, in this episode about the disappearance of the moon, not a concern. Seriously, that's not the first concern. Outside of her wanting to get rid of her sister, I would say that, all things considered, she probably wouldn't be that bad a ruler. I mean, considering the world, as I said, as I just ranted on, doesn't really need the sun, at least not for it to be visible, because it is always there, even if it isn't visible. I'd say that, all things considered, she probably wouldn't be all that bad a ruler. it's really not that bad. The only real bad thing to come out of this scenario is the lack of Celestia, which, let's be honest, we don't get to see her that much anyway, so maybe I've kind of... Wow, maybe... Am I suddenly buying for the Lunar Republic? What? Okay, you know what? Off track. All back on track. And that's more or less where the first episode ends.